This program is presented by University of California Television. Like what you learn? Visit our website or follow us on Facebook and Twitter to keep up with the latest UCTV programs. Also, make sure to check out and subscribe to our YouTube original channel, UCTV Prime, available only on YouTube.
Before introducing our speakers, I would like to acquaint some of you briefly with the CAPS Center and also the Hamdani World Harmony Lecture Series, because I see a number of new faces in the room. Founded in 2002 in honor of a legendary professor of religious studies here at UCSB, who also was a former representative from our congressional district, the CAPS Center is committed to the belief that public dialogue is vital to democracy and critical for an informed and engaged citizenry. Nonpartisan and non-sectarian, it exists to strengthen the principles on which democracy rests, namely tolerance, respect, civility, and the importance of the common good. To advance these broad and rather idealistic goals, the Center sponsors a diverse set of programs and activities. Free public lectures in the community and at UCSB, which feature well-known speakers on a range of key and timely topics each year. An internship program that sends students to the University of California centers in Washington, D.C. and Sacramento, plus a year-long service program for interns in nonprofit organizations here in Santa Barbara. Undergraduate courses on environmental ethics, biomedical ethics, diversity and justice, as well as ethics, enterprise, and leadership. A quarterly forum called the CAPS Forum on Ethics and Public Policy, which brings distinguished speakers to our campus in conjunction with the courses that we are teaching. And finally, a graduate fellowship in support of student research in the area of cultural literacy. Of the various public events that we do present each year, we are especially proud of the Hamdani World Harmony Lecture Series. It was established by Jamal and Saida Hamdani, and the inaugural speaker was Dr. Shirin Ebadi. It was an extraordinary experience, as today promises to be. Recognizing that the need for innovative ways to deal with global challenges is part and parcel of our own responsibility as an educational institution, the World Harmony Online is intended to serve as a resource for innovative solutions that will enable us to create a nonviolent and equitable world with access to education, health, and technology for all. I encourage you to visit its website, World Harmony Online, and also take a look at its mission, which is to inform and mobilize people as global citizens into serving humanity. Today's event will feature two enormously distinguished guests. Vivek Wadhwa, Washington Post and Bloomberg Business Week correspondent and columnist, will serve as the interlocutor in a far-reaching conversation with Ahmad Zewail, winner of the 1999 Nobel Peace Prize in Chemistry, and Linus Pauling, Professor of Chemical Physics and Professor of Physics at Caltech. Mr. Wadhwa is Vice President of Academics and Innovation at Singularity University. He also serves as a fellow at the Arthur and Tony Rembe Rock Center for Corporate Governance at Stanford University, Director of Research at the Center for Entrepreneurship and Research Commercialization at the Pratt School of Engineering at Duke University, and a distinguished visiting scholar at the Hall Institute of Global Learning at Emory University. And Dr. Zewail currently serves as the director of the Moore Foundation's Center for Physical Biology at Caltech. In 2009, President Obama appointed him to the President's Council of Advisors of the White House and also named him as the first United States science envoy to the Middle East. He's the recipient of many international awards, including the Wolf Prize in Chemistry, the Tolman Medal, the Robert A. Welch Award, the Priestley Medal from the American Chemical Society, and most recently, the Davy Medal from the Royal Society. Please welcome me in joining them. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You know, we're going to be talking about the future of humanity, but Dr. Solow and I were talking first about the future of the world. Before we worry about the big picture, let's start with what's happening in the Middle East. Right now, we're talking about a very important part of the world smoldering. You have rockets and bombs, and you know, that could ignite World War III the way things are going. What do you think is happening there?
Well, let's look at the bright side first.
Right. Is there a bright side?
Yeah. Well, first I want to thank the Hamdani effort and foundation for doing this lectureship for all of us. And I'm delighted to see the Chancellor here and Mrs. Chancellor, and they are friends, and also my former president, which I can see here. Here he is, and Doris also here. So, and I see Fred Anson. He used to be my former chair of the department, so my salary was dependent on him. So I'm delighted to see.
So all the bosses are here.
That's right. But because they are former, they are not going to control my life anymore.
All right, good.
So,
the best boss is the former boss.
That's right.
Right.
Well, I think the Middle East is witnessing a major change right now. The concept of the Arab Spring is sweeping. I don't know if this word means too much, but it's stuck now. So the Arab Spring is going on. We're seeing some fruit of all of this. In Egypt, for example, we had a recent election for the president, Morsi. I think that is the first time in almost 60 years that Egypt can elect in a democratic way, not too different from what's happening here in the United States. Egypt also is trying now to build democratic institutions. But this is not easy. If you look at history and you see what happened after revolutions, these are non-trivials to have all of this being smooth. You have conflicts. You have conflicts between different political parties. You have conflict between religious parties and secular or civil parties. Right now, everybody in Egypt, because they look, and we'll talk about this, I guess, on social media, and they see the Americans are rich, so they expect by having the revolution and achieving democracy that everybody's going to be rich, and everybody's going to have cars, and everybody's going to... So the expectations is very high. I was told by the Prime Minister there was 4,200 strikes in the last 40 days.
Wow.
Because everybody really feels that that's what democracy is about. So I think you're seeing all of this. I'm not saying that it's all bad. By nature, I'm an optimist, but I think that at the end, you didn't expect any different, because if you have a dictatorship or a totalitarian regimes, at the end, that's what you expect for 30 years or so.
You know, I'm getting a taste of Egyptian democracy and social media. The word is that social media fermented the revolution there and lit the fire not only in Egypt, but in other parts of the Middle East. And it's certainly creating havoc in China for the Chinese government. I just tweeted about the fact that I'm honored to be doing this discussion with you over here. and I don't have any Egyptian friends. And suddenly I was bombarded with positive and negative comments from all over Europe. I mean, what's going on over there? How is it that Egypt, of all the countries, is so much into social media, into Twitter, of all the things?
Yeah. I think this is the thing that I'm learning because my generation was different.
Right.
I didn't use this.
I noticed you're not on Twitter.
No. But I was actually, I was from, was the youth during the revolution in Egypt, and I lived the whole thing. And it was absolutely remarkable. All holding these devices and SMS and communicating with each other. And so I could see in Tahrir Square, they can fill it by the social media. But I think what I'm learning is that it's one thing that you can bring people together, but it's another to be using this power to think about structuring something useful. And social media doesn't do that. So the human brain is still needed, and the human thinking is still needed, that you sit down together and you try to come up with an overall plan. And that's I have not seen through the social media. There's another aspect also of the social media that I'm not comfortable with. The language that I see on Twitter and Facebook, and I certainly would not have written or speak this kind of language during my education time. It's below the level of good education.
You know, I get death threats because I'm so vocal about immigration. I've written a book called The Immigrant Exodus about America's flawed immigration policies. I have several people who harass me almost all the time on Twitter. What I've learned to do is to simply ignore that, because that is 0.001% of the population. But my view is that it can do a lot of good. I have access to the world's resources. It's just the fact that I tweet once that I'm going to be with Dr. Zuhail, and suddenly I have people from Egypt now contacting me, wanting to connect with me and so on. I think it's a very powerful force. I mean, the question is, how do we now harness it to help Egypt evolve itself and the rest of the Middle East evolve itself and gain more knowledge? Because I think a lot of the problems that are happening are because of ignorance. You said that they started learning about American values and the fact that America is rich and so on. The expectations were raised. But if they spent more time on social media, they would realize that there's poverty in America, that there's the same desperation in parts of America that there is in parts of the Middle East. How do you now take it from just being so excited about the positives to now having a balance and to understanding America for what it is? That it's not one evil empire that's out to get Islam. That's really, many people like them with different views. Some say stupid things. You have some extremists who burn the Quran. And then you have a lot of great people with solid values who are very tolerant and wise. How do we now get this across, and how do we educate the Middle East on this?
Well, I belong to a society called the American Philosophical Society, and it started by Benjamin Franklin. And I liked actually what it says about its useful knowledge. And I think there's a major difference between useful knowledge and just information. Information is everywhere.
Right.
And so the question is that how do you transform this information into useful knowledge? And that's not what I see in many cases. It's good that you're getting information and you tweeting with other information. But the real issue is how do you really transform this into useful knowledge? And in my opinion, you cannot do this unless you have a good education system. If you have a good education system, you know how to look at all of this information. And this is not any different, by the way, from the old days of my generation when I went to the library and I saw thousands of books around me, and it has an information, but very few will be able to utilize this information in order to create useful knowledge. And so I think most probably the world will evolve to learn how to deal with you told me earlier that you get about 1,000 messages a day or so.
Between email and Twitter and Facebook, it's about 1,000 messages a day.
Right, and the question is that your time, and how do you synthesize out of all of that something that's really helpful. I think ultimately the education that we are going in the direction of more and more education through the internet.
Right.
And the involvement of Facebook and Wikipedia and the Twitters even, and all of that. So the role of the university is going to change. And the communication we're going to get is going to be through the internet. And in fact, I attend many places in Washington where people now are thinking about the future of the universities in the coming 50 years, including UC Santa Barbara. I mean, what would you do really in the age of the Twitters and Facebook and all of this learning? And now, you know, a Nobel laureate at Santa Barbara can tomorrow give a whole course on physics, and I know some of my friends, you know, here in physics, and that course will be benefiting not only the students at Santa Barbara, but millions of people around the globe, and they can take the test and everything like this, and it will be cheaper than attending UC Santa Barbara. So the question is that, what are you going to do? This is a major challenge.
Right.
A, how do you synthesize useful knowledge? And B, the challenges of education, of electronic education, if you like, in the coming 20 or 50 years.
Yeah. You know, it's not 20 to 50 years. This is one thing people don't realize. Right now, India is a land of 1.1 billion people. There are 911 million cell phones in India right now. China has 1 billion cell phones out of 1.3 billion people, which means that the poorest of the poor are now connected to cell phones. You would have seen this in Egypt as well, that not too long ago, as recently as 10, 15 years ago, villagers were disconnected from each other because they would have to go to cities to work, and families had no way of communicating. So they would send letters back every 2 or 3 months, with small pieces of paper which they couldn't read themselves because they're illiterate. So they would have someone else write those letters, and communication, they were basically cut off from each other and the rest of the world. Now they simply pick up the phone and dial for practically nothing. So you have the poorest of the poor connected. The next revolution is happening now. This device over here is the world's cheapest computer. $20 is what is being sold for to Indian kids right now by the Indian government. The production cost is $35. The government is buying it for $40. They're cutting it to half and giving it to 100,000 students this month. Another 5.6 million over the next few months. But this is going to create a revolution like we've never seen before, because now not only are those villagers talking to each other using voice, they're going to do Skype calls with each other. They're going to be sending videos to each other. They're now going to be able to watch your videos on YouTube. They'll be able to come to UC Santa Barbara's website and download every lecture that there is, and they have access to the same knowledge that anyone in America has. This decade, no, not 20 to 50 years, this is what I need to correct you on. This decade, you're going to have another 3 billion people coming online. So it's the first time in human history that you've had people connected to each other. When most of the people in this room grew up, the only knowledge you had was from your families, from your parents, from your neighbors, from your teachers and your preachers. That was your entire universe of knowledge. If you were rich, you had an Encyclopedia Britannica. That was like the ultimate trophy, is that you owned an Encyclopedia Britannica, and that had the knowledge of the world. And people who had that were a small segment of society. Today, the poorest of the poor, within the next 2 or 3 or 4 years, you're going to have literally beggars in India who have access to the same knowledge that President Ronald Reagan did when he was in power. They have access to the same information, timely information, and they have access to the world's resources. What's going to happen to this? I mean, this is a great opportunity and a great risk. I mean, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, but I think I'm making a distinction, maybe perhaps unlike you. I'm making a distinction between the ability to connect, and in a huge number, in the billions, and the ability to learn something. That's a different story. And the really looking at the structure of universities, as I said, it's not clear it's going to be only short time, but universities have to begin thinking, what is the role of the university in the 21st century? But devices like this, the value of them, where I see it, is that it is remarkable that still we have illiteracy as high as 35% in certain countries. It is remarkable that in some countries, 70% of the women are illiterate. And therefore, where I see this could be fantastic is to eradicate illiteracy around the world. Because it's a very simple device, it's cheaper, the government can pay for some of it, and you can learn. And you can't move in the world we're living in today without I mean, the illiteracy now that somebody like me is in dealing with computers, you know. So I think that that's where I see this. But I'm trying to make a distinction very clear here, is that information and connectivity is fine. But the question is that, what are we benefiting from this? We have to ask this critical question, whether it's a university or a school or in even the so-called conflicts between different things.
Ahmed, you know, I'm at Singularity University where we teach these advances. The founder of the Singularity are Ray Kurzweil, who's one of the greatest futurists of our time, and Peter Diamandis, who founded the XPrize, and SpaceX, and so on. They're the eternal optimists. They keep talking about all these advances and how we'll solve humanity's grand challenges and so on. And I keep sitting back and saying, well, let's take manufacturing as an example. I'll take a detour and explain to the audience what's happening. You know about these advances. But take robotics, for example. When we were young, we used to dream about Rosie, the housekeeper. We used to watch Will Smith and the robot on Lost in Space. We had androids and Cylons. Those things never happened. We sort of became pessimistic and assumed that this was all science fiction. The reason why those things didn't happen wasn't because it was not technologically feasible. To have, when we were young, we used to have these erector sets. We used to have these mechano sets. We would have these pulleys and pieces of metal that you could connect with motors and so on. So connecting a device that moves isn't hard. The voice recognition, face recognition, communication, the intelligence of it was so complex that you would have needed a computer the size of this entire hall to do what you can do on Siri right now, which is voice recognition, to do face recognition, which your iPhone does. So the computing power has increased exponentially to the point it's practically free now. So now robotics is possible. The result is that you have very sophisticated robots milking cows, doing farming. You have robotic jets. You can also now, a company called Rethink Robotics announced about 2 months ago a robot called Baxter that has 2 arms, which can do human-like movements, a face which tells you its emotion, and it has sensors that can detect everything around it. In other words, it can do what a human being can do. It costs $22,000. It doesn't sleep. It doesn't drink. It doesn't complain. It doesn't have any emotion, so all it'll do is work over and over and over again, which means that the cost of labor is now practically zero. I've written an article for Foreign Policy magazine and for Forbes, both of which were variants of each other. We said that it's the end of China manufacturing, that over this decade, manufacturing will come back to the United States. The problem is that jobs won't come back, because what we're talking about is very highly automated manufacturing, which requires highly skilled jobs. What do you see happening to the USA and happening to the Middle East and the rest of the world in this highly automated? Because I'm going to ask you 2 or 3 questions on this front. I'm going to ask you about jobs. I'm going to ask you about, get into your field of expertise, which is biology, because there are a lot of advances happening there. I'm going to challenge you next on that. But first, let's talk about jobs. Where do you see the jobs? This is something I've debated with Ray Kurzweil in my Washington Post article. He has all of his rosy projections, and I don't buy them. I don't see where the jobs are going to be. I'm hoping that you're more optimistic and you have some good answers.
Well, I don't know if I have a better answer, but I think...
You're a Nobel Prize winner. You must have the answer.
Well, that's one of the problems with Nobel Prize winners. They're supposed to know everything, which is not true. But let me just say first I have no doubt that the technology and science will continue to develop and progress. There are all kinds of things about the end of science. There are books now you can read about the end of science, feeling that because we now know quantum mechanics and relativity and we can calculate things and predict things, that it's over. I don't agree with that. I think that a young person here at UC Santa Barbara might discover something that we never thought about before. So I think science and technology will continue, and as I see it, it will be from the atom still, which people think that we understand everything. From the atoms to going to outer space. You look at the United States now having this robot you're talking about robots. I mean, robot on Mars and Curiosity, and this is something that it's incredible. I mean, I personally witnessed that, at Caltech, at JPL, and if seeing this with that precision going into through the atmosphere of Mars and landing exactly in the same spot, that shows incredible innovation and ingenuity in what this country have done over the last 50, 60 years. I think in the life sciences, and we might get into this, I mean, discoveries are almost by the month, you know, from stem cells all the way to trying to create new life in a single cell. So I have no doubt about this. But I don't think that's a problem here. We know that the developed world is going to be able to invest more and get into more science and more technology. I have concerns about the developing world, and I wrote op-eds about this, especially this country, and maybe we can touch on it. But I think the main problem that I see threatening our globe, before we get into your subject, one is a huge gap between the rich and the poor. It's very good and very well that we invent new things and make money. But when few of us make huge amount of money and the majority of us are not able to live, we're going to create a gulf, a big one, and we're going to have world instability. Right now, more than 80% of the people on this globe, from the 7 billion, are in the so-called population of the have-nots. They don't have access to water, they clean water, the income is about $1 or $2 a day, they are frustrated. So this is a whole big area that we as people on this globe have to look at, even with the huge advances we're making in technology and in science. The second point, I think, is what we're seeing now in the rise of fanaticism in religious beliefs and the like. And this is something that is not only in the West, but is happening also in the East and in the Midwest, in the Middle East, and that concerns me a lot. So again, we might develop all kinds of advances, but you know, people are worrying about Iran and the nuclear bomb and the like. And the way I see it, actually, when nations get the nuclear bomb, like Pakistan and Israel and others, I mean, I think they have to be very careful about using this nuclear bomb, because if they use it, there's another country is going to be countering the attack. Right. So in many ways, that's not my concern. But my concern is that the technology has advanced so much now that individuals can cause a huge damage. Right. Huge damage. I mean, the dirty bombs that people predicted, for example, that you could really cripple New York by just some dirt from radioactive materials, viruses. Huh?
You can design right now. You folks may have read about DNA sequencing happened about a decade ago with Craig Venter beat the U.S. government in the Human Genome Project to sequence the genome. It cost several $1 billion, depending on how you count it, to get that far. Today, you can get a complete human genome sequence for about $3,000 or $4,000. Within a few months, you're talking about $1,000. Within 2 or 3 years, you're talking about $100. 5 years, you'll have iPhone cases that sequence the genome. So that's possible right now. At the same time, synthetic biology is advancing exponentially, which means that you can write DNA. You can use a design tool to design a new type of virus and print it. And the scary thing is that kids are doing it. There's a contest called iGEM, in which high school kids are they're combining the gene of a firefly with that of a tree to build a tree that lights up at night, for example. Mayo Clinic has developed this cat that lights up at night. Okay, the Russians are resurrecting the woolly mammoth. Major, an elephant-like thing through DNA and so on. So all of these things are now becoming possible. So you're right that we're dealing with, a kid might accidentally create a doomsday virus. How do we deal with that? What is,
Well, that is a big question, and I'm not really sure we know the answer. And in fact, you probably heard President Obama talking about, the concern about cyber threat. Right. I mean, we don't think of these things, but we are worrying about nuclear bomb and we're worrying about somebody attacking and this and that. But, all what it takes is a couple of brilliant people. And if they get into cyberspace, that you get 1,000 messages from a day, you can imagine what will happen to the rest of us. We'll be completely crippled.
Look at the head of the CIA.
Yeah.
I mean, the way he was brought down by technology, right? So that's what the risk factor is, that with every good, there's a bad.
Yeah, there is always, I tell my children, you know, the knife that you use in the kitchen, it can be good and bad. You can cut your finger, but you can use it well. So I don't think that that's but regarding the system biology, even in this country, there are some issues that the answer is not clear to. I give you an example that is being discussed now. There's, I think, a group of scientists from the Netherlands. And do you all know about this virus that was being transferred among the, I think the avian, I think it was called. And it's transferred among the chickens and the like. And the question, if it comes into the humans, it's a very serious problem, very serious problem. And so this group of scientists in the Netherlands have kept doing different mutations in this virus. And now they can actually, in principle, they have shown you can transfer it from the animal into the humans. Now you can imagine what the consequences of this on millions and millions in this country. Now, you have a dilemma, right? Should you stop this kind of research? Or should you continue with this research and have government regulations? And until today, this is a big conflict. So the technology comes. From my point of view, there is a triad. And the countries that are going to do very well, I'm reducing it and simplifying it into triad. There is basic research, and I am a very strong believer in this. And I know the chancellor here is also a big believer in this. I think this idea in this country that we know now everything and that we can focus on technology. And we are not going to spend money for curiosity-driven research. I think that would be the beginning of the end if we do that. Because technology have its luster, you know, you can be very excited about the gadget and so on. But the bread and butter for this country's innovation is basic research. So there is this corner of basic research. Then you develop that to produce new technology and new innovations, like the one we're seeing that transformed our life. But then you have the society itself. Because if the society is not aware of these developments, the good and the bad, as you mentioned, and what can we do with them? And there is even now, there will be the question of the ethical questions that you have to ask, and the religious questions. Right. I don't think people should be shying of this, because even in this country, I claim, there's at least 1/3 of the people who are believers. So you cannot ignore this.
Well, Bush banned stem cell research.
Well, but you cannot
States.
ignore it. You go to a country like Egypt, the majority of the people are believers. They vary in their beliefs. So I don't think we can just simply say this is not an important factor. So it comes to the ethical, the religious, and how the society is going to deal with this in order to handle the technology and in order to understand the importance of basic research.
Right. Now, we're talking about the university system. I'm going to be critical about the university research system now, since you're a renowned researcher. We spend a lot of money on basic research, but the way the system is structured, very little of it ever sees the light of day. That academics are incentivized to publish papers versus commercialize their technologies. So we may already have invented the next MRI, the next internet, the next semiconductor, except it doesn't reach the light of the day because of the way the universities are structured. How do we fix that?
Well, let me tell you, I've been at Caltech for 35 years. Mm-hmm. And I believe we had a wonderful system. And let me share it with you. And personally, I followed this with a recent invention. And I think the more we're going to deviate from this in this country, there are some issues that I'm concerned about. Caltech is a research-oriented university. We have undergraduates, and we care about them, and they are part of the education process. But the focus of Caltech is to produce new knowledge. Now, when I came as an assistant professor in 1976, the sky was the limit. I can think of anything, even esoteric, And in this op-ed, I said it was esoteric. Nobody cared about what I was trying to do. But the key here is that as a professor, working with a research group, seeking to produce new knowledge, if you don't have this burden that you have to produce something that has to have a value for the society, that's how innovations comes about. That's how discoveries come about. Any researchers, and I know there are distinguished people here, who say they knew what they're going to discover, I don't believe it. We all wander around and find our own ways and so on. But the university, like Caltech, it says, if you have an invention, and we feel and you feel it's important, we have an attorney's office and patent office, and will take that invention and knows how to deal with it to the outside world, and you go back to your laboratory, and you will get few percents of the money that we will make. So we have a system in place. Now, I think, to me, that is the most ideal system. And we have, if I can just finish the point, and we had recently invented something that the Caltech felt it's very important. And indeed, they took it to the patent. It went out now, and it's being manufactured right now, and we'll all benefit. My concern about you getting the university professors all involved in the commercial enterprise. A, we are not good in the commercial enterprise. At least 90% of us are not good in the commercial enterprise. B, is the fact is that you're really transforming now the university, which is trying to seek new knowledge, into being in the business. And that is a huge concern for me.
Now I'm going to put my entrepreneurship hat on. I founded 2 companies before I became an academic. Here's what the problem is. If you're now a venture capitalist or an entrepreneur or someone who wants to convert idea into invention.
To the market.
To the market. You try dealing with the university technology transfer offices. It's easier to deal with the Egyptian government or the Indian government than to deal with those folks, because they are so, I mean, it's a bunch of lawyers you're dealing with. They're trying to squeeze every little ounce of life that you have out of you in return for what they're giving you. And then you get this invention which is useless to you. A patent is useless. You need to get the professor, the inventors working with you on converting into something useful. And the professor is simply, all they're interested in is you're interested in writing more papers so you can get tenure. You don't have to worry about it, but that's what most junior professors are worried about. They're not worried about commercializing their invention. The system is not geared up to commercialize what you've just built.
Well, I think you can optimize it, and certainly Caltech in recent time has become more alert to what you're making and modified it, and they become much better system now in terms. But I think you also, the other case is of concern to me, because if professors become so involved in the commercialization of things, where is their duty also as academicians? And let me ask you something, since you know about it. If I were to be a professor and you said to me, I'm going to give you $1 million to do a research on a new drug, right? And I will support your students and this and that. Okay, so I come and I have a group of 20 people. And do you think I'm really going to let them go to research with a curiosity-driven research? Or do you think that a priori I want to get into this drug, and I will make many of them be working on this in order? So it's a very delicate situation.
If I'm giving you $1 million, if you're getting public money, you're getting it to advance the economy, okay? To solve real problems, not to sit there and have fun in academia or just to teach. Society wants something out of it. The investors want something out of it. And there's what the problem is. That I've written several articles about it. I've taken a lot of fire from my academic friends because I'm looking at it from the commercial point of view. If I'm going to invest in basic research, I'm doing it because I want some results from it. If at the end of the day, you and the scientists say that, look, it's not our concern, that's your problem. We're here to teach, we're here to research. There's a mismatch between what's expected and what's delivered. And that's the problem with our system.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with that point. I think I'm not sure I agree with that, because I think, you know, I was having dinner last night and I was mentioning the Nobel laureate in economics, Robert Solow from MIT. You know, he pointed out that the real force behind the GDP of America over the last 50 years or so before he died is the fact it's about 20% capital and 80% innovations. And the fact of the matter is, it is very well known that American innovations, especially after the Second World War, came from absolutely investment in basic research. Because these people wander around in all kinds of directions. Nobody would have thought that these two researchers at Bell Labs, one of American jewels, in my opinion, you know, they will be playing with the electrons and the materials. Right. And for you as an entrepreneur, you will say, that's a wasting of time. But then all of a sudden they discover that this material is switching the current on and off. And that's the source of the digital revolution in America.
What I'll argue is that there may be 1,000 times more inventions like that which haven't been commercialized because the researchers, the scientists, the professors went back to teaching versus taking this invention and turning it into
well, you need to, as you said, you need to fix the output part. And I think universities now are realizing this. I'm frankly even concerned about the universities right now in terms of the amount of time that the leaders of the university are spending on fundraising. I think it's too much. I think I would like the leader to spend more time on where are we going with education and what are we going to do with research. But it's all now driven by how much money you're going to get. And it shouldn't be for a country as rich as America.
I agree. So on this thing, I'll leave it with a compromise, saying that we need to provide adequate funding so that professors and university heads don't have to become salespeople.
Yes.
That's a waste of their talent.
That's it.
But on the other hand, we do now have to come up with a better system which takes the research into idea, and that system is broken right now. So we need to figure out somehow creatively how to do it. It needs to be done on a university by university basis because every university is different. There's no such standard university. Every university has a different culture and values and has different problems. So let's compromise on that. Okay. Now I want to get back to...
I didn't answer, by the way.
I want to get back to one of your key fields, biology. Now, we agreed that synthetic biology and the advances that are happening in computing, combined with medicine, combined with being able to print these types of DNA and so on, create major risks. What should we do here to stop that killer virus? We could have the bubonic plague being reinvented many times worse. We can have new types of Ebola being invented by researchers out of ignorance. That they're sitting in the ivory towers in academia saying, we're going to experiment. All we care about is research, research, research. We don't worry about the rest of the world. How do we stop that? Do we stop science from advancing? What's going to happen over here?
No, you can't. And as I said, there are very touchy issues even coming up to the level of the president of the nation, namely that what would you do with something like this that can affect 100 million?
Right.
You know?
Or billions, literally. Yeah.
Well, I'm talking about the U.S., for example, alone. And so it's not straightforward. But on the other hand, I think that if you look historically, even the nuclear bomb, I mean, Caltech, I said, was the now late Bob Christie, and this was one of the things that's really some of the best minds in the world were thinking about. Is this a good device to create, And but what I'm trying to say is that the more the society is debating the issues and addressing the issues, and the more education we have in the society, the better off we are. But the issues are complex. There is no recipes, 1, 2, 3, that's what we should do.
So we can't stop the research, but going on the current path, we could be in trouble.
We cannot stop research. I mean, this latest Nobel Prize, and by the way, I'm not an expert on biology. I just cross fields.
I read some of your work. It's amazing. I mean, You seem to be an expert in everything.
Well, but I think that the latest Nobel Prize in medicine, for example, is unbelievable. I mean, you take a piece of my skin as an adult, and by biochemical reactions, you can bring it back to be embryonic stem cells. I mean, that's unbelievable.
Absolutely.
So we're going to synthesize your heart and do other things, and so this is the kind of things that I think will have to continue, even if you said we are not going to invest in stem cells. Somebody else is going to do it.
Right. But we're going to open up to questions in about 5 minutes or so, but I want to throw some thoughts out and revisit something we started talking about very briefly. Right now, we're pessimistic about world wars breaking out about water. Coming from the Middle East, water is your most precious resource. The forecast that by 2050, China will be 40% desert. India, Pakistan, predictions that World War III will break out over there because of water rights and so on. But the irony is that 71% of the Earth's surface is water. If you were an extraterrestrial landing here, you would call this a water-rich, endowed planet. There's more water here than almost anywhere else in the universe. The problem is that we can't convert that water into drinking water. We can't synthesize it. But why can't we do that? All it takes to convert the dirtiest water into distilled water is to boil it, right? It takes energy. So energy is the next, So if we had unlimited energy, we'd have unlimited water, okay? And if we had unlimited water and unlimited energy, we'd have unlimited food, because you can do hydroponic gardening and so on. Now, there are already predictions that America is going to be exporting more oil than Saudi Arabia in the next few years or so. At the same time, the cost of solar, we're negative about solar as a society because of Solandra and all the politics that went into it. But solar is now cheaper than diesel is in India. I'm sure you've been there and you've seen that you have diesel generators everywhere polluting. Solar is now cheaper than diesel in India as of this year because prices dropped about 30% last year. According to the European Photovoltaic Association, solar will be cheaper than grid next year in Italy. Within 3 or 4 years, it'll be cheaper than grid in Germany and in Switzerland. By the end of this decade, at current rate, solar will be cheaper than grid in the United States, which means that this decade, we won't need our utilities anymore. We'll be generating our own energy. So, and at the same time, you have many advances happening. Craig Venter, the guy who sequenced the genome, is now developing a form of algae that he can convert into petroleum. He believes that by the end of this decade, he'll be generating enough gasoline from algae to power 250,000 cars. So, based on all of these advances that are happening, just looking linearly at what's happening here, we'll solve the problem of energy this decade. Dean Kamen, the person who invented the Segway and the insulin pump, has a device that which I've seen, which is amazing. It's the size of a refrigerator. 100 watts of energy it consumes, less than a hairdryer. It'll go for 7 years without maintenance. It'll purify 1,000 liters of water a day, 1,100 liters of water a day. It was just tested by Coca-Cola in Ghana. They took it to 5 villages. It worked flawlessly for 6 months. He's now commercializing it in several countries. It's going to be commercialized. So that itself could solve the problem of water. And there are a number of other solutions for water. So what I'm saying is that if you just look at the advances that are happening, it's very likely that in this decade we solve the problem of energy, food, water, and we create abundance in all of these things. But the question is, how do we now take this prosperity and abundance and benefit the world from it? How do we take it to the Middle East? Will society evolve fast enough? Do you see us as a society being able to evolve fast enough to share this prosperity, share this abundance?
Well,
right. That's something that really haunts me. I don't know the answer.
I don't know either. But,
right. I keep saying you're the genius over here. I came here expecting to get all these answers.
But I think actually you are very optimistic because there are some technologies that are, I call it simple technologies. And I think you can develop these and with ease, such as what you mentioned about purifying the waters. But there are very complex problems that, quite frankly, the best minds around the world don't know how to deal with it. President Nixon said, war on cancer. And we invested billions of dollars in it. We didn't solve it. It's not that easy. I think the issue of the energy, for example, yes, there are progress in the efficiency of the photovoltaics, and now the Germans are using the thermal in many, many directions. The Chinese now are the world best exporters of the photovoltaic devices for the rest of the world. These are all good things, but we haven't solved the energy problem.
But if we just go on the current path, just at the way things have gone for the last 20 years, we go for another 5 or 7 years, we've solved the problem of energy in the United States and the rest of the world, just on solar.
But I think, if I recall, and many Americans here recall, every American president in their campaign, they will say, we will become energy independent, self-sufficient, and we haven't achieved
But the U.S. will. I mean, just based on fracking, I mean, the shale extraction, there are solid forecasts that the U.S. will become a net exporter of oil in this decade.
But you have to keep in mind that the increase in the energy consumption is huge. I just read an article that the biggest challenge facing China, the biggest challenge is its consumption of energy right now. 70% of it is dependent on foreign import. So the point is that I agree that there is progress, but these are very complex problems. There is a prediction now, as you know, for example, as far as the war for energy. I mean, many will argue that the reason the United States went to Iraq is because to secure the oil fields.
That's really exactly why that happened.
So there are wars. I think that I just read a book. People are expecting the next war is going to be in water. You see, the conflict, especially in the Middle East.
That's what I'm saying. But on the water thing, I'm telling you that I also went to Chile. Another company called AIC has developed this plasma-based purifier. That device could be produced for $50. The cartridge costs $1. It'll kill the bacteria in the water, which is responsible for 60% of the Earth's waterborne viruses, diseases caused by water infections. That product works as well. I've drunk that water. So what I'm saying is these are just two things I've seen which are working today, ready to be commercialized, which could solve the problem of water. So there are a lot of advances happening. My iPhone has more computing power than existed on the entire planet the day I was born. Think about it. This is unimaginable. This would have been a Cray supercomputer version 1.0. This is more powerful than that Cray supercomputer was. What does it do? It sits in my pocket waiting for me to tweet or to check email, okay? On my, I'm a heart patient. On my phone, I have these two leads. I touch them, I launch an app, it does an EKG for me. This is a cardiologist as well. Right now, the EKG gets emailed to my cardiologist who reads it. But if you look at IBM Watson, which defeated Jeopardy champions, IBM is now working on coming up with teaching it, taking it to medical school, literally. The same type of learning that they did to win Jeopardy, they're now programming it with medical information. I would much rather trust IBM Watson to read my EKG than my drunken cardiologist. I mean, Watson doesn't, I mean, I love the guy. My cardiologist is great. I'm sure he doesn't drink that much, but the fact is he's a human being. I can check my EKG 10 times a day and just keep uploading it and having Watson check it. One of the companies on the second floor of Singularity University where I teach is developing the Star Trek tricorder. There's a XPrize, a $10 million XPrize to develop an iPhone-like device which can detect disease better than a panel of board-certified physicians. That, I have no doubt, I've already seen the pieces of that coming together. There are labs on a chip, which I've seen, which can detect infectious diseases. All of these technologies are happening right now. It's very easy to be pessimistic. There's so many advances happening in so many fields, and they're converging. So you have a confluence of events happening, and which basically lead me to believe that this is going to be the most innovative decade in human history, and we will solve the grand challenges of humanity. Yet we're pessimistic because we keep looking at, I've also read the articles about World War breaking out over water and so on, but I also know that the water problem is being solved. And again, on energy, I think there was a front page New York Times article in the last week which talked about USA being energy independent this decade. No one could have imagined 3 years ago we could not have predicted that the US would produce more oil than Saudi Arabia. It was considered to be impossible. Yet it's a reality that's already happening right now. So there's so many amazing things happening on the positive.
No, surely. Right. It's just that you have to look to the what's the consequences of this?
That's what I was hoping you'd be able to help me with. Because I can see those advances, I can't see the consequences.
All these issues that you've alluded to, the ethnic, the comfort level that people have killing each other rather than using these technologies for coming together are, in the present tense, clearly demonstrating that we are much more comfortable killing each other than living. So I really, you've kind of already answered some of these questions, but I throw it out maybe with a little different spin and invite you.
But I think he's dead right, though. We don't discuss this enough as a society. And it's always been the case whenever we build technology that with this good, with removing the typewriter, you remove jobs, okay? But on the other hand, you made people more productive. So with 3D printing, with robotics and AI, we're going to make America more efficient. We're going to bring manufacturing back here. But then we're going to cause Chinese manufacturing to cave in, and you're going to cause massive unemployment over there and unrest. And the Chinese are going to now become more nationalistic, and that could create World War III on its own. So everything has a balance. And like I said, this is the challenge of humanity, to be able to cope with these questions and evolve rapidly enough. This is for all of us. There's no one that has the answers. All of you have to be part of the discussion and part of the debate.
I just want to comment something for you very quickly. And that is, I mentioned earlier that there is this triad of the basic science, the technology, and the society. The reason you're not seeing the debates in this country as you would like to see it is because, if you look carefully at what are the essentials that made this country a great country, and you want to reduce it because we scientists like to reduce it. In my view, it's three things. One is the governing system, which is democracy. Two, science and the innovations that we spend the time on. Without science and the great things that came out of this and the power that gave the United States, we could not have done. And third, that people don't mention too much, is the work ethics that has been in this country for a long, long time, for a variety of reasons. But so science, we leave it aside. Work ethics, we say, although some of us seeing a little bit of decline, but we'll say it's okay. But then when you come really to the political dimension, and so what are we doing right now in this country? We're having an election in 2 years, and all television stations are going around and trying to find out candidates and people and everything. So the whole country is being engaged for 2 years of time on an election. We have the divisions between the two big parties, and the people days and night in the media is discussing. So we don't really have the time right now. And maybe, I'm not saying that this is going to happen, but maybe this is about time now for the United States to go back and think about what the founding fathers wanted, and to perhaps tweak the political system in order for this country to be going back to debating the serious issues that facing the future. Don't think that education here, even education, which we talk about the developing world, it's threatened in this country. I mean, when America scores number 17 in mathematics on the level of the world, that leaves something to be thinking about. So there are very, very serious issues besides the technology and everything else. There are very serious issues for the future of the nation. And I believe the country doesn't have enough time right now in Washington to be discussing these very, very serious issues.
But look at the positive over here. This lecture is being sponsored by Hamdani. You have Zuel in Egyptian, you have Wadwa in Indian here representing America. Okay. Isn't that amazing?